Hello there, class. It's Faisal here, coming to you with your class of the day for July 15th. So, we're going to be talking about gravel today, and I think I've already got a nice video for you guys about gravel part 2, so I'm going to splice that in for here. So, listen to the long-haired version of me. So, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I want to get through some of the details of the story right now, right, and sort of break them down into three parts, specifically three different characters. So, first of all, I want to talk about the narrator, that person who's narrating the story, whose gender is uncertain, right? The narrator of the story, Karo's little brother or sister, whatever she or he is supposed to be. So, the thing to know about this story is that this person is a little kid, right, who is too young to have very clear memories, right? So this sort of comes across in several different places in the story, right? You might notice, say, for instance, on page 8 over here, when Karo tells the narrator, "Go tell mom that I'm drowning." She says things like, "I may have said that, or I may have just stood there not obeying and trying to work up another argument," right? The word may means it might have been like this, or it might have been like that, right? And the reason for that is, well, think back to your own life, right? When you did things at 6 years old, right? Can you remember them that clearly? Like, do you know exactly what you were thinking and exactly what you were doing? Probably not, right? And the same thing is happening here, where, it's just happened when the child was very young, so therefore they can't remember very well. All right, so that is one thing to keep in mind when you're reading this story. This, by the way, is what we call being an unreliable narrator, right? An unreliable narrator is when the person telling the story is not trustworthy, right? So a good example would probably be a girl's story for this, right? In that, the narrator is drunk and he's complaining and everything like that. So that guy's an unreliable narrator, right? Because he's, a bit of an idiot, right? This person, it's not that, the narrator's a bad person, but they're unreliable because their memories of what happened are, well, not very concrete, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty about what actually happened to Karo because of that, right? We know that she drowned in the water and everything like that, but, well, why did it happen? Well, we'll see here on what page is this? Page 9 at the top, right? The narrator says, "I went to see a professional person about this once, and she convinced me, for a time, she convinced me that I must have tried the door of the trailer and found it locked. Locked because my mother and Neil were having sex and had locked it against interruptions. If I'd banged on the door, they would have been angry. The counselor was satisfied to bring me to this conclusion, and I was satisfied too for a while. But I no longer think that was true. I don't think they would have locked the door because I know once they didn't, and Carl walked in and they laughed at the look on her face." So, that's what the psychiatrist told her, right? Is that, she wasn't able to open the door because of the parents having sex, but, well, that's, even the narrator doesn't believe that, right? She doesn't think that that actually happened, right? So that sort of puts a question mark on everything that happens, right? You sort of have to. It makes this story a little bit tricky because essentially, everything that you're being told, it's not firm. Sorry. It's not on firm ground because, well, it's this unreliable narrator, and the facts are not as clear as you might prefer them to be, right? And that's something that you should keep in mind both when you answer the short answer question and when we move on to essays, is that this is a young person, or she was young, and the memories aren't very sharp. But let's try to figure out what we can figure out with the information that we have, right, in terms of Karo's death. So again, we know that the narrator had a job to do from Karo. Go tell our parents that Mia and Karo are drowning, right? So that's outlined on page 8, right? I was to go back to the trailer and tell Neil and our mother something, that the dog had fallen into the water. The dog had fallen into the water, and Karo was afraid she'd be drowned. Blitzy, drowned. Blitzy wasn't in the water. She could be, and Karo could jump in to save her. So, that's what she was supposed to do, but of course, this is right here. Yeah, here it is. Kao instructed me to do as I was told. Why? I may have said that, or I may have stood there not obeying and trying to work up another argument. Right? So, and let me read the next bit. In my mind, I could see her picking up Blitzy and tossing her, though Blitzy was trying to hang on to her coat, then backing up, Carol backing up to take a run at the water, running, jumping, all of a sudden hurling herself at the water, but I can't recall the sound of the splashes as they, one after the other, hit the water, not a little splash or a big one. Perhaps I had turned toward the trailer by then. I must have done so. So you'll notice she says perhaps, and I must have, right? So that shows she doesn't remember very well. But nevertheless, when I dream of this, I am always running, and when my dreams, I am running not toward the trailer, but back toward the gravel pit. I can see Blitzy floundering around, and Caro swinging toward her, swinging strongly on the way to rescue her. I see her little brown checked coat and her plaid scarf and her proud, successful face and reddish hair darkened at the end of its curls by the water. All I have to do is watch and be happy. Nothing required of me after all. What I really did was make my way up the little incline toward the trailer, and when I got there, I sat down, just as if there had been a porch or a bench, though in fact the trailer had neither of these things. I sat down and waited for the next thing to happen. So, essentially, she's supposed to go call for help from Neil, right? That's sort of what Carol wanted, but the narrator didn't do it. Now, how come? Well, there's a couple of different things. One is she's small, she's a little kid. It's very possible that she just was either being kind of dumb, or she didn't really understand the instructions, right? She didn't understand what Caro was doing, and so she didn't do what she was supposed to do, right? So that is the first set of possibilities, right? It would probably be too much, right? If any of you answer, the question, the short answer question, who's responsible for Caro's death, and you say that it was the narrator, that would probably be a little much, because I don't think there's any evidence that suggests that she wanted to kill her sister, right? I don't see anything in there that would suggest that. But, nevertheless, you could definitely bring up the other things, right? For instance, what the psychiatrist said, right? Maybe the parents were busy, or well, not parents, the mother and Neil were busy with each other and ignored her, right? We don't really know. All we know is that she did not fulfill her role in Caro's little drama here, right? She did not call for help the way Caro wanted her to. Caro, by the way, even if she could swim, jumped into the water with her jacket and her boots and everything like that. So it seems likely that she was weighed down by all of those clothes. And, holding a dog on top of that, of course she's going to sink, right? So, yeah, that's what happened to Caro. But in terms of why the narrator didn't do their job, well, it's hard to really say. What's going on with the narrator here? We can't really say, but we do know that they did not fulfill their role. Then there's the mother, right, who is sort of the other side of the story. And I can tell you, I've taught this story before in previous classes when we still had classes, and I always know that a lot of students really hate the mother, right? They don't think that she was a good mother because she, wasn't taking care of her kids and everything. And there's a lot to criticize her about, right? But let's be fair to her, right? So first of all, at first when she moves out to the trailer, she is acting a little crazy, right? She, for instance, walks around naked in her house. Where's the naked part? It says on the bottom of the second page and the beginning of the third that after she left her house and everything behind, she meant to go around naked at least some of the time in the country as long as the weather stayed warm. That didn't work out because when she tried it, Caro went and hid in her cot, and even Neil said he wasn't crazy about the idea. Right? So she is doing all sorts of wacky stuff when she is living with Neil, right? And she's sort of going a little bit, I guess you could say, crazy out there, right? Walking around naked and everything like that. Also, constantly having sex with Neil, I should add. That's, one thing that Caro or the narrator mentions also on the top of page 4, right? My mother's good times with Neil went on into the night. If I woke up and had to go to the bathroom, I'd call for her. She would come happily, but not in any hurry, with some piece of cloth or a scarf wrapped around her, and also a smell that I associated with candlelight and music and love, right? So, very, I guess you could say controversial mother that we have here. But before you come down too hard, right? And I know that some of you, when you answer the question about who's responsible for Carol's death, you're going to say mother, absolutely. But before you come down too hard, there are signs that she starts to change as life in the trailer goes on, right? For instance, there's the whole thing with the wolf, right? Let's see here. This is on page 5. Uh, this at the bottom, right? Then I noticed that Blitzy, who was always with us, just behind or ahead of us, wasn't there anymore. Another dog was on the opposite side of the road, a few feet from the mailbox. My mother phoned the theater as soon as we got home and let Blitzy in, who was waiting for us. Nobody answered. She phoned the school and asked someone to tell the bus driver to drive Caro up to the door. It turned out that the driver couldn't do that because it had snowed since Neil last plowed the lane, but he did watch until she got to the house. There was no wolf to be seen by that time. Neil was of the opinion that there never had been one, and if there had been, he said it would have been no danger to us, weak as it was, probably from hibernation. Caro said that wolves did not hibernate. We learned about them in school. My mother wanted Neil to get a gun. You think I'm gonna go get a gun and go shoot a goddamn poor mother wolf who has probably a bunch of babies back in the bush and is just trying to protect them the way you're trying to protect yours? He said quietly. So we'll talk about Neil in a moment, but she is showing that she's not completely irresponsible there. The idea of a wolf being around her children does freak her out, and she's saying, let's go get a gun. Now, they don't actually get a gun, right? But she at least shows that she's concerned, right? So before you say that she's the devil, then, well, at least take that into account. Lastly, after Caro dies, she does change a little bit more, right? A lot more, even, because she then starts to work a bit more seriously. Let me find that part. So this is on the second, or page 10, right, where it says, my mother went back to her old duties at the theater. At first, she may have worked as she had before as a volunteer usher, but at the time I was in school, she had a real job with pay and year-round responsibilities. She was the business manager. The theater survived through various ups and downs and is still going now, right? So she does sort of turn over a new leaf after Caro dies and starts to manage the theater. So it's not like she's just walking around naked forever, right? She isn't like that for her entire life, right? But well, you guys can judge her as you wish, right? If you're not convinced and you still think it's the mother's fault, then that's okay, right? You're allowed to think that, right? There's certainly something you can present a good argument for. Then there's Neil, right? Neil is interesting character. So first of all, he's a hippie, right? And this is set in the 1960s. Hippies are a peace movement that rose in opposition to the war in Vietnam for the United States, but it also was a cultural movement, right, with long hair, braids, and people being like, "Oh, peace, man," and all that stuff, right? So he's that kind of guy, right? And I hope you recognized him as that, right? So he is not really about working hard or anything like that, right? He's more interested in just relaxing and everything like that, right? So Neil is maybe not the most responsible person in the entire world. So, plus, it's worth mentioning, he's a Canadian hippie, right? The hippies in America were protesting against the Vietnam War and everything like that. Canada wasn't in the Vietnam War, right? So there's nothing. I mean, you could protest against America, but he was in no danger of being drafted and anything like that. He's in Canada. There's no Vietnam War in Canada, right? We were not part of that. Nevertheless, two things about him. So, first of all, on page 7, there's a small detail that I hope you guys picked up, right? This is just at the top. A Saturday, Kara watched The Friendly Giant with me and made comments that spoiled it. Neil was lying on the couch, which unfolded into his and my mother's bed. He was smoking his kind of cigarettes, which could not be smoked at work, so had to be made the most of on weekends. Caro sometimes bothered him, asking him to try one. Once he had let her, but told her not to tell our mother. Now, I want you to think about that wording here. His kinds of cigarettes that can't be smoked at work. Huh. What are those? His kind, huh? He's a hippie, remember? So, I give you a 90% chance that what the author is meaning there is that's marijuana, right? So he is smoking marijuana, and quite significantly, he did give some to Caro, right? So he gave marijuana to a small child, right? I think Caro's supposed to be about 13 or so, right? He gave marijuana to her, and well, that's the kind of person that he is, right? Where he's sampled them that way. So, that's one thing you definitely can mention about him. But in terms of the death, well, let's ask the question of what responsibility Neil has. Now, the narrator talks to this guy at the end of the story, right? And this is an important bit here, right? So, let's see here. This is on page 11. So he gets in touch with Neil, and let's see. What did he do for a living? He said that he tutored students in preparations for exams. Also, he helped them write their essays. Sometimes you might say he wrote those essays. Of course, he charged. It's no way to be a millionaire, I can tell you. He lived in a dump, or a semi-respectable dump. He liked it. He looked for clothes at the Sally Ann. That was okay, too. Suits my principles. So, he ends up, after Caro's death, he's a tutor, but sort of a sketchy tutor because he does the students' work for them, right? Don't hire anyone like Neil, by the way. No. That's not a good way to be successful. But he lives in a dump, right, or semi-respectable dump, and his clothes come from Sally Ann, which is Salvation Army, right? That's the charity store. And well, he's a bit of a wreck, but here's what he says. about Karo. I was stoned, he said, and furthermore, I'm not a swimmer. Not many swimming pools around where I grew up. I'd have drowned too. Is that what you wanted to know? I said he was not really the person. He was not really the one that I was wondering about. Then he became the first person I'd asked, "What do you think Karo had in mind?" The counselor had said that we couldn't know. Likely she didn't know what she wanted. Attention. I don't think she meant to drown herself. Attention to how bad she was feeling. Ruthann had said to make your mother do what she wanted, make her smarten up and see that she had to go back to your father. Neil said, it doesn't matter. Maybe she thought she could paddle better than she could. Maybe she didn't know how heavy winter clothes can get, or that there wasn't anybody in a position to help her. He said to me, don't waste your time. You're not thinking, what if you had hurried up and told, are you? Not trying to get in on the guilt. I said that I had considered what he was saying, but no. The thing is to be happy, he said, no matter what, just try that. You can. It gets to be easier and easier. Nothing to do with circumstances. You wouldn't believe how good it is. Accept everything and then tragedy disappears. Or tragedy lightens anyway, and you're just there, going along easy in the world. Now goodbye. I see what he meant. It really is the right thing to do. But in my mind, Carol keeps running at the water and throwing herself as if in triumph, and I'm still caught, waiting for her to explain to me, waiting for the splash. Okay, so, Neil there. Right, first of all, he's saying that he was stoned while this was all happening with Caro, right? So that he was smoking marijuana and that's why he did what he did. That's his explanation, though. You've gotten in all 4 of your short story questions, right? These ones here, right? For happy endings, King of the Raft, Girl Story, and Gravel. All right, so most of you have done the first 3 already, so you just have to do the Gravel one, so that's good. All right, guys, so I will see you all tomorrow during the Google meeting, and thanks so much for listening. Yeah, bye. So, I hope you guys found that video helpful, right? I tried to go through all of the major issues there. So, here's what's going to happen right now, right? So, first of all, the seminar is going to be happening today, or if I'm going to post this video early, so if it's, I'll just put July 15th at 2 p.m. Right, so we're going to be having a seminar there. You might have noticed I talked a few times in the video about something being written, and I haven't given a question for Gravel because you guys have an essay to do and you don't have as much time as my last class. So there's no question, but we will be having a seminar, right? And it's only an hour long and it's a pretty big class, 20 people, and I do want everyone to talk. So we're going to focus really on Gravel. We're not going to talk too much about the other stories. So the questions that we're going to be looking at here is, first of all, was the mother a responsible mother, right? So we'll be looking at that issue, which I know people will have some comments about, right? This is also an essay topic, right? So that'll be the first thing I ask you for. And then this next question I'm going to ask is, which is probably going to be the biggest question that we talk about, is who is responsible in the story for the death of Caro, right? So do we blame the narrator? Do we blame the mother? Or do we blame Neil? Or do we maybe even blame Caro herself? That is up to you, and I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about that. All right, so that's question number 2 there. And our last question, if we have time, we'll also talk about, why is the narrator feeling so guilty, right? We'll talk about that as well if we have time. I imagine the second question and also the first question, people get really worked up about the first question, will take up most of our time there. So at 2 o'clock, July 15th, which is the day of this class, we are going to be discussing those issues. This is a seminar, so attendance is mandatory, and I hope you all participate Especially those of you who didn't talk too much last time. I want you guys to talk, right? If you did talk a lot, right, don't fuss when I pick other people to talk, right? Because that is, the nature of the beast. Now, I also should talk about essays. Now, this is your first of 2 essays in the class. The first one's on gravel. The next one's going to be about Othello. So this gravel essay, right? You go into the assignments tab and you find it right here. Is about gravel, first of all, and let me just go through the 3 questions here, right? So this is for the essay. Or actually, before I talk about the 3 questions, this is going to be a 1,000-word essay, right? So it will have it'll come out to about 4 pages, right? 12 font double spaced, right? I'm going to talk more about essay formatting and essay structure in the next video, right? But that's what you're looking at for this, right? 4 pages, 12 font double spaced. In terms of the number of paragraphs, right? Students often ask me that question: how many paragraphs do you need? Well, no, it's 1,000 words, meaning that if you have 6 paragraphs in 1,000 words, it's fine. If you have, 8 paragraphs, it's fine as well. But let's go through the questions real fast here and get some understanding of what the assignment is going to be about. So you're choosing one question, of course. And the first question is: consider the actions of the mother in Gravel. She leaves her husband in order to pursue her own happiness, but her children end up suffering as a consequence. Do you feel that Monroe was trying to present this character as an irresponsible mother, or was she a woman who simply was trying to make a good life for herself? So we're going to be talking about this in the seminar as well, right? And it's a very important topic, right? So here we're looking at the mother and sort of trying to make a decision about what kind of person she was, right? Was this is the mother's actions in the text, are they unforgivable, right? Do you think, oh, this lady, she should be in jail, or she should be, punished, or something? She's just completely irresponsible? Or is it more complicated than that? Was she just trying to sort of figure out how to have a better life after being so frustrated and everything like that in her with her first husband? The thing to think about here, right, is that idea of feminism and agency, right? Because, the mother was trying to take control of her own life by leaving her husband, right? So she was doing that, but in doing so, right, she brought her children to the gravel pit, right? So in doing this, making this attempt to leave this husband, right, to take control of her own life, she brings her children to this gravel pit, right? So you can analyze and discuss her motivations in this question. So for those of you interested, number 1, pay attention to the discussion today, because I'm sure people will have a lot of different ideas. Then we have the second question. At the end of the story, Neil says, "The thing is to be happy no matter what. Just try that. You can. It gets easier and easier. It has nothing to do with circumstances. You wouldn't believe how good it is. Accept everything, and then tragedy disappears. Or tragedy lightens anyway, and you're there going along easy in the world." Discuss whether you agree or disagree with this man's philosophy. So, uh, this question is meant to give you the opportunity to sort of analyze the character of Neil and his philosophy, right? So it's whether you agree, but I don't want you to just forget about the story when you are talking about this, right? You could, if you agree with him, say, by adopting this philosophy, Neil is able to move forward with his life and not feel guilty all the time, and that's what everyone should do, right? You could say that, right? Or if you're disagreeing, you could say, look, it's haunting him this way, haunting him in that way, right? So basically, discuss, first of all, the philosophy basically is whatever happens happens. There's nothing you can do. It is what it is, right? That's his philosophy there. and I want you to just sort of deconstruct it by agreeing or disagreeing or just analyzing this man's philosophy, right? So if you're very interested in Neil, give that one shot. And the last question, right? Explain the role that memory plays in the story, and Ryan Munro has given us a narrator who has such a poor recollection of what actually happened in the story. So this one is dealing with the postmodern aspect of the story, mainly the fact that this narrator doesn't know what actually happened in the thing she witnessed, right? So I want you to sort of look at the theme of memory in this story and sort of tell us, well, why did Monroe make it so that we had this kind of story when she easily could have made it so that the girl was 2 years older and knew exactly what was happening, right? And it would be mostly the same story, but in this case, we've got a narrator who doesn't really remember, right? So this would be an interesting paper for those of you who want to sort of look at the psychology of this particular story and maybe even look into the idea of, memories or unreliable narrators or anything like that. So those are your three choices, right? You've got the mother, you've got Neil, and you've got the narrator through memory. So this is due on Friday, right? So you don't have too much time, but you do have to, get it done, right? And it's a summer course, so those of you who are already saying, "Oh, can I hand it in, next week?" No, there's no time. We're gonna be going straight into Othello, honestly, starting on Friday. So just keep that in mind. So the best place to start with an essay, right, is the thesis statement, right? How do you start an essay, right? Well, you want to start with a thesis statement, right? A thesis statement is your answer to the question in one sentence. So, what I will say about this, I'm gonna post a video as soon as possible um, about essay structure, right, and how to write a proper essay and everything like that. So that's going to be coming on Wednesday after our seminar, right? Wednesday being, well, today's class. So that's coming soon, right? But remember, when you start an essay, you want to always figure out what's your answer to this question, right? So if you're doing number one, you need to be able to say, yeah, yes, the mother is an irresponsible mother and should be in jail, or no, this mother, did her best and this was just a tragic accident, or whatever it is you want to say, right? So start with your thesis statement, and we will go from there. And for the next few days, just know, I know essays are hard. People want to ask a lot of questions. You can message me through email, right? faisal.ahmed@tdsb.on.ca. Or you can do, as many of you have done, just use the in classroom contact system, right? Just do that, right? And I will get back to you as soon as possible. So we can leave it there for now. I'm going to go ahead and post this video early so that those of you, again, I really apologize for the video being late today. That was not my fault. That was Brightspace's fault. But nevertheless, we will leave it there. Meow. See you at the seminar at 2 o'clock. Don't be late. Meow. Take care, guys.